There you go. You're good.
Okay, I see a live button up in the top right.
Okay, so that means we are officially on the air, and we'll have some folks joining in. And I don't know, Sam just ran off. Sam or Ben, when you get a minute, I do want one of you to bop in here. There's a couple of things I need to talk to you about. Curious if this other screen or monitor is going to show up. And curious to see how that increases. So right now, folks are joining in, and it's a little early, but that's okay. Maybe they've got us just on their background while they work. I'm sure they're working this morning. So Scott, how's things in your world? What's going on with you?
Well, right now we're enjoying a good market. There's strong demand. Market times are pretty short. I'm probably doing 90% sales as far as my appraisals go. The other 10% are private. I call them private appraisals for banks that finance rehabbers. So business is good.
Great, great. Well, we're excited. We've got a lot of things happening over here at Appraiser eLearning as well. We've got more courses on the way. We've got Mr. Jack Bailey's course, Introduction to Income, going to be coming up, available real soon. We're bringing in a lot of our instructors and developers are from across the country to help write courses. And Scott, what we do with that and the viewers, we're getting more and more viewers in, and we'd like to welcome everyone to our webinar. It's called the Appraisal Report, and we're excited about that. We have Scott Cullen with us today, so we're excited about what he has to talk about. But we don't actually officially start till 10 o'clock. So Scott and I are just kind of having a bit of a conversation, and you're welcome to join in and kind of visit with us until the official start time at 10 o'clock. So over at Appraiser eLearning, we've got a lot of exciting things going on. Miss Diana Jacob will be coming up in July, and we're excited to have Miss Diana from Louisiana to come up. I'm so excited. And Scott, what we're doing is Diana has all but quit teaching. She goes to a couple of locations throughout the year now and teaches, but her travel around the country like she was doing for decades has kind of come to a close, and that's sad, but certainly understandable. But what we're doing at Appraiser eLearning, we're going to bring her into the live studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're going to capture Miss Diana on video. And we're actually going to put that peppered out throughout her curriculum. And so folks that have followed Diana for years and years, or folks that would like the opportunity to take a class from Diana, will have that opportunity via online. So we're excited about that. We've got several courses coming. And Scott, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Appraiser eLearning is teaming up with the National Association of Appraisers, and we're looking forward to having an appraisal conference in Nashville, Tennessee in the spring of 2018. We're working on the dates now. So Scott, we would love, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a trade show or an appraisal conference, but we'd love to have you come out, maybe have a booth or maybe speak or something like that.
Sounds like a good time. I've been to many trade shows, but that was back in the days when I was a traveling salesman before I got into the appraisal business.
Gotcha. Well, I've been involved with the Appraisal Summit and Expo for many years. That's out in Vegas, and we've been encouraging conferences in different locations. So we're tickled to death that we're going to be having one here in Nashville, Tennessee, in the spring of 2018. So again, we've got more and more viewers chiming in. It's still just a bit early. We'd like to welcome all the new viewers joining in minute by minute. We have a survey question, and that was just brought into me. So Scott, again, we may repeat some of that, and that's okay, but just tell me, what were the questions that we asked of some of these viewers or some of the participants today? What were some of the questions that were asked of them?
Well, what I asked them to do is to think back to an appraisal, a recent appraisal, where they had a bedroom count adjustment for a third bedroom, and then asked what their adjustment was, what they found in the market, and then also what the sale price of the house was.
Okay.
And then the second question was there a fourth bedroom adjustment, and what was that value? So what we've done is we've only gotten, last night when I put it together in the spreadsheet, there was only about 58 good returns in the sample. Some people didn't answer. They answered with words instead of numbers and so on. But what we've done is we've compiled that and developed an average adjustment and an average sale price. And from that, we've got a percent. And I've built that into a little calculator that people can download, when the program is over here. And what they'll be able to do is input a sale price of a house, and then they'll get the combined wisdom of 58 appraisers around the country. What would the bedroom adjustment be expected to show? Now, the reason I think that's interesting is because when UAD started, they started collecting data on the appraisers, right? And all of our reports are now files with data rather than just a PDF. So collateral underwriter is judging us by how our adjustments line up with our peers. So I thought this was an interesting way. If it's good enough for them to judge us by what everybody else is using, I thought maybe we'd get a little bit of head start and maybe try an adjustment in a report and see if it narrowed the range of values and see if it appeared to be correct in our markets.
Great. So what I'm hearing is that this is an example of a market survey technique,
right?
Which is a recognized technique in appraisal literature.
Correct. Now we're sampling appraisers instead of MLS.
Sure.
I think if they really pressed you on it, they would want you to be talking to market participants, which are probably agents. And off in the future, I've got a plan to survey real estate agents. And I think they're going to be a pretty good source of information, because whenever you make an appointment for an appraisal, you've got a very friendly real estate agent that wants to help you in any way they can, right? They'll fill out a survey. And we're going to try to put together the technology to combine that and maybe even have it available by region. But that's a long way off. But hopefully we'll have some market participant survey results that we can incorporate as time goes on. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg, I think, for what this can turn into.
Right. And so I think it would be fair to say what we've got right now is the results of analysts of market participants, because that's exactly right. That's what we queried, right?
Right. And sometimes that's the best data you can have, and it's very fast. It's at least something to try,
Sure. Well, one of the things, and I've seen other folks interview, like you suggested, agents or brokers in a particular market. There are many appraisers out there that also have their real estate license, and
sure.
And I've never been a realtor, but I am now. I got my real estate license about August of last year. And when I tell appraisers that have also a real estate license, it's a huge opportunity, because what you can do is not only interview agents and brokers, which kind of keeps the pulse of market participants or reviews that. You could also maybe during an open house use that as an opportunity. I think it's a great idea to say, hey, the folks that come into an open house, maybe have a little inquiry card for those. Now that's truly market participants. And
sure, right.
You can have a little inquiry card for them, and to encourage them to fill it out, maybe you give them a $25 gift card or something to Texas Roadhouse or somewhere. And they're going to fill it out, and you're capturing all of that data, truly data from market participants directly. So there's different ways to do that.
Well, that's a good idea. And with iPhones becoming so prevalent, maybe there's a way to even do that with technology, with some kind of an app that'll collate the information for us. We'll think about that.
Sure. Sure. So how long have you guys been, I know you've got some software. We're going to let you talk about that later in the broadcast, but how long has that been up and running and refining and so on and so forth?
Well, we're in our second year, and in our second year now, we've just, in 6 months, we've passed the total sales from the first year. So it's growing. People are using the product. It all started probably back in my mind, maybe 6-7 years ago, when there was an emphasis on supporting adjustments. I wanted to learn how to do that. I was just using kind of the folk ways of my predecessor, my boss, and his friend.
Right.
And those adjustments worked pretty well. I was also using percentages. I rarely found a match pair. I tried to use those, but when regression became kind of the talk of the industry, I tried it myself, and I'm no regression expert. I've learned more over the years, but I couldn't make it work.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I tried, and maybe we'll save this for the 10 o'clock. I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself, but
That's okay.
I hired a grad student from the University of Minnesota who was studying statistics. He was a master's candidate, and I thought, this guy will know, you know. So I gave him a big sample set. It was just over Christmas, you know, just I paid him for a couple of days of work. I gave him this huge database, and he came back with, you know, in a nutshell, there's too many variables. This isn't going to work. So I kind of had that in the back of my mind for a few years until I met a guy named John Willems, who's my partner now. He had recently retired. He was a database consultant now as a retired. He used to work for the state of Minnesota. He was a director of enforcement, I think, for alcohol and gambling. So he's an intelligent guy and had developed a lot of expertise with databases. And we got to know each other, and I was telling him about my problem, and between the two of us, we kind of came up with the idea, why don't we benchmark to something rather than to MLS samples. He had the same problem. I gave him a huge sample set of I narrowed it down, 1950s Ramblers in a first ring suburb, you know, thousands of transactions. And it wasn't predictive. We couldn't get it to work. It was too many variables even for that number of sample. So anyway, we ended up with trying to benchmark with the cost manual. And we kind of realized as we were going along that the cost manual has a perfect sample in it. It's a virtual sample, but it's perfect. There's no operator error when the data is entered. There's no time factor. It's just the cost. So we found a cost supplier, National Building Cost, who we could license data from. And John started playing around with the data, and it was a monumental task. There were so many variables even in the cost data. Well, then we had this idea. One night I used regression in the cost table, and I almost fell out of my chair because, and I'll show you the chart later on, but if you multiply the cost per foot by the number of feet for a given quality of a house, and then put that in a chart versus the quantity, you'll get a perfectly straight line. You'll get a marginal cost number. For instance, it might be for quality 4, it might be $87 plus $43,000 is the cost to build any size house. So if you give me the number of square feet of GLA, I can put it in that formula and end up with a cost new according to the cost manual. And that's a third-party source that's recognized in the industry. And all of a sudden it became very simple. I was expecting some kind of a twisted curve, you know, like the cost would change with the quantity, but according to the cost pros, it doesn't. It's a linear relationship. So what we did is we built a database to combine that marginal cost. Then we were going to depreciate it by some input from the appraiser. We settled on remaining economic life because that's the percentage of cost that the market pays for the building by definition, right out of the appraiser literature. And then that cost data is national in scope, but they have a database that will move it up and down a little bit according to the local building cost by zip code. So we were kind of on the way with our 3 databases. One of them was the zip code, one of them was the quality rating, and then the other one is the actual cost per foot of the house. So that was our first application, and a lot of people started using it, and we started getting feedback, and everybody liked all the adjustments except the GLA adjustments seemed kind of high. And
yeah, if it's more than $20 a foot, people freak out, right? I mean, it's supposed to be $20 a foot, Scott, and it's been that way 40 years, and it never changes, right?
Right. My boss told me $20 a foot for a 2-story, 25 if it's a Rambler. And it, interestingly, if you bracket the property, it really doesn't matter too much what number you use. It always comes to the same number in the middle.
Right.
So I think that's been covering a lot of error along the way. But we recognized that with our first application, the big wild card that we weren't getting right was the amount of depreciation. It's fair game to guess to estimate depreciation by entering an effective age on page 1, but to really use depreciated cost, you need to go to the market and calculate what the depreciation is. So we came out with our second phase, which starts with an estimate of market value, which is relatively easy to estimate, and then it works backward through the cost approach to get to the effective age of that particular property. So now we're off and running because we've got market-derived depreciation applied to a third-party cost source, and we think it's a really good place to start it. It only takes a minute or two, and you can have a place to start in your grid and see if it starts to make sense.
Sure, and I think that's what appraisers are starving for right now. Unfortunately, we all were kind of taught, well, do it this way. And Ben and Sam, I am getting some echo. I don't know where that's coming from. Scott, I don't know if you are or not.
I'm okay, but maybe I should switch to headphones.
Let's, we've got about 2 minutes before our start time. So if you're going to do that, you may try and do it quickly. And I don't know that it's coming from you, but it might be. So as I was saying, I think that was kind of appraiser's dirty little secret. We were always worried about being in the hot seat or being in a court of law or whatnot and having an attorney ask questions.
Right, exactly.
And the thing I always tell folks is most attorneys won't ask a question that at least most attorneys won't ask a question that they don't know the answer to, or at least they think that they know the answer. And so you don't have to worry about them asking you, where'd you get that adjustment for car storage, because they don't know the answer to that question. Right. So you don't have to worry about that. Well, the time has shifted. The tide has changed in that, especially with Fannie Mae, UAD, and collateral underwriter, they are asking those questions.
Exactly.
So whatever support you have, you better make sure you have something.
Right.
That's what we're going to talk about and focus on today, and we're glad that you're here. So we've got about a minute before we start.
Did that help with your feedback?
I think it's helping for me. So as long as you're okay, we'll proceed with that, because I'm not getting it now. So I do have 10 o'clock. So let's go ahead and get started, Scott. We've got several viewers on, and we've got more coming in every minute. We'd like to welcome all the appraisers that have tuned in. My name is Brian Reynolds. This is the Appraisal Report offered by Appraiser eLearning. It's a webinar that we're offering at no charge to our viewers and anyone that would like to jump in. And so we're excited today to have our guest, Mr. Scott Cullen. And I'm going to give an opportunity for Scott to just say hello and introduce himself to all the viewers.
Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm Scott Cullen. I live up in Eagan, Minnesota, which is a suburb of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I've been doing appraisals for about 19 years now, and it's always been full-time for me, and I enjoy the work and happy to be here today.
Great, Scott. So we were talking before we went live or our start time about kind of a dirty little secret or what appraisers have not had to worry about too often, and that's adjustments. I was speaking about when they're in the hot seat per se. I have appraisers from around the country call me. I got a subpoena. What do I do? Or, I have to testify. What do I do? And I used to say, well, you don't have to worry about them asking you about your adjustments, because typically attorneys don't ask questions that they don't know the answer to, or at least they think they know the answer to. And that's changing with collateral underwriter and UAD and more scrutiny in our environment more now than ever. They are asking some of those hard questions. And quite frankly, we need to have support for our opinions and conclusions. So one of the techniques, there's several recognized techniques in appraisal literature. I used to always say, Scott, be careful if you say, well, I based it on paired sales.
Right.
And I said, you may just have opposing counsel say, we're going to take a recess, and the bailiff's going to escort you to your office to go grab those paired sales. And then you kind of get that deer in the headlight look. So, there are several recognized techniques in appraisal literature. Paired sales is one of them. Regression is another. Statistical analysis might also include group sales, sensitivity analysis. But there's one, and I think you're kind of the guru on this, so that's why we wanted you here today. There's one that's called depreciated cost. And I just want the viewers to think through this a minute. One of the things we do is we look at cost and we subtract depreciation, and the answer is value. So if we just move those components around a little bit, instead of taking cost minus depreciation to get to value, what if you take cost minus value is depreciation? If we take cost minus depreciation, you'd get your value, or support for a value adjustment, if you will. So Scott, just from the very beginning, kind of walk us through the ABCs, if you will, or what you're doing, what you're all about.
Okay. Well, first of all, if I'm going to go back to that courtroom example, if the attorney asked me where I got my garage adjustment, I might say, well, I measured the depreciation in the market, and the cost of a garage stall is $12,000 in this market, and the depreciation is 50%. So I used the depreciated cost of a garage stall, which is $6,000.
Right. Love it. And that works. That can work for any component, whether it be bathroom or bedroom, garage, deck. I mean, whatever you could break down and secure the cost and the depreciation. The remaining number is value.
Well, the cost data that we license allows us to do GLA, basement size, basement finish, bath count, garage stall, fireplace, deck, that kind of a thing. But interestingly, there's no bedroom cost. Like, according to the cost data, a 1,200 square foot house with 2 bedrooms costs the same as a 1,200 square foot house with 3 bedrooms. Now, I know that might sound funny. I tried to figure out the cost of a bedroom, whether it's how much is a closet worth, how about another door, another light switch. But I came to the conclusion that if we're going to say that we're using published data and the data doesn't talk about bedrooms, we're just going to ignore that. And then we're going to have to figure out a different way to do a bedroom count adjustment. And I think we've done that by sampling appraisers rather than by looking at the cost.
Yeah, so let's just dive into that right now. We can talk about your sample. And before the broadcast, you were actually speaking that it would be better or best to actually try to survey market participants direct. What we've done here is surveyed of market participants, or appraisers, if you will. But so some questions were asked of our viewers, and if I misquote this, Scott, please stop me. But what I have in front of me is the bedroom count adjustment for a 3rd bedroom, and what about an adjustment for a 4th bedroom? What number did you use to represent market reaction to that 4th bedroom? So we gave you the answers that our viewers submitted. and I think we had just under 60 responses. So tell us what you did with that data and if that was something that can be tangible.
Sure. What we found is that we took the total of the adjustment values for the third bedroom and the total price that they reported for those houses. And now we had a ratio. We found out that just over 2% of the sale price was the consensus for the adjustment value. And I put that in a little Excel spreadsheet that you can download later on. I can show you where to download that. But if you'd like me to demo that calculator, we can put it up on the screen. Is this a good time to do that?
Yeah, let's do that. I think I mean we're going. We've got about 85 viewers right now, so let's go ahead.
Okay, do you see the spreadsheet up on the screen?
We've got it.
Okay. First of all, there's 5 different calculators included here. I'll just buzz through what else we have. This is a way to bracket GLA. So when you're looking for your comps, type in your GLA and it'll bracket that plus or minus 25% just to speed things up with your comp search. Also, we can convert age and year built into their corresponding values, acres to feet, feet to acres. But on the bedroom count, the way that we've structured this, let's say that you've got a $300,000 house. The pure consensus, if you will, is that a third bedroom is worth $6,087 and a fourth bedroom is worth $3,200. Now, those are the average of all the responses. And it's based on something that data scientists actually recognize. It's called wisdom of crowds. And we've got a reference to that. There's a very good video that we've got on our website that explains how that works. But the wisdom of crowds goes all the way back to a guy named Galton, who was the first guy to use central tendency and percentile, words like that. He was an early leader in regression analysis. So he's a credible source for using a survey sample to predict.
Okay, let's back up just a second. Keep that graph there if you don't mind, Sky.
Sure.
And looking at that, I'm seeing that the graph is showing that the third bedroom, I believe, if I'm doing my math right, is about 2%.
Correct.
And then when we jump down to that fourth bedroom, I'm looking that it's a little less than that. Is that right?
That's right.
A little over 1%. It looks like.
Right. A good way to figure that out is just to enter 100,000 right here. And see, there's 2.029% and
Gotcha.
and 1.09%. So there's the secret.
Okay. And those just for our viewers again to recap, those percentages were taken from a query or a survey of basically appraisers, right?
Correct.
So you got the 2% from the analysis of the survey of the appraisers, the question that was asked. You got the 1% or slightly over 1% for the fourth bedroom from the same pool of data.
Right. And a lot of people answered 0, which is valid. I mean, in my market,
sure,
the most expensive houses are 1-bedroom ramblers with a finished basement that has got 2 or 3 more bedrooms. Right. So the 1 bedroom upstairs isn't important in a high-end walkout rambler up in my market. So 0 can be a good number. Absolutely.
Sure. And there are many times in which a fourth bedroom might not contribute anything.
That's
certainly,
right.
Increasing and decreasing returns. I mean, what about bedroom number 14? Right.
Right.
So,
right.
What the point that,
right. What about a community with a household size of 2.1 people per household? Why do they need a fourth bedroom? You know,
sure,
I mean, there's a market there.
Absolutely.
Right.
Hey, while we have this screen up, what's the stuff on the right hand side?
Okay. This is a simple calculator you can use to do a market time adjustment. So up here, you would let's say you've got a comp in your report that closed on December 6th, or excuse me, it came under contract on December 6th, and it sold for $270, and there was 10,000 in seller pays. So they actually paid a net price of 260. The effective date was on the 19th of June here. So there's an interval of 195 days between when that house came under contract and the effective date of the report. This rate is something that you'll have to get separately from your MLS. There's a lot of different ways to do that, but let's say the rate was 2.1% annually. What this is doing very quickly is showing us that there's a market time adjustment of $2,900 to that sale back in December.
Okay.
The next one here is we're calling this the market extraction of site value. And again, this relies on other data that you already have. But if the comp sold for $250 and we know that it costs $216 to build it, and that you know that the effective age is 12, maybe it's 10, maybe it's only a 10-year-old house, so you're pretty sure of that number. The economic life, again, relates to the quality level of the house. In our case, this is a Q4. It's got a 60-year economic life. So there's 17% depreciation, which is $36,000 compared to this cost new. Site value improvements are 5. You've just extracted the site value from the market at $65,000.
Gotcha.
And again, this is just all like you were talking about. It's all cost data that's kind of blended different ways. You need to know something to start, but you can solve for land value, you can solve for depreciation, and we've always been using it just to solve for value, which I don't think is the right way to use it myself. But
okay. Do you have any other examples, Scott, that you want to pull up on the screen as far as a extraction or a depreciated cost for an adjustment? You said you could do a fireplace,
right,
a garage, some of these other components.
Right. For that I need to get into our application. I'll try to pull that up here.
Okay. Well, while you're doing that, we'll just talk about garage, for instance.
Okay.
You know, we have a tendency of using an adjustment and just using it across the board. And if I don't know if you can pull one up, you know, relatively quickly for a garage adjustment, that'd be great if you could. But one of the things that we need to, you know, the sharpest tool in the appraiser's toolbox is judgment. Dr. Sanders Kahn said that the sharpest tool is appraiser's judgment. And so we can get these fancy calculators, we can use regression, but it really is a matter of common sense, if you will. So it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense if you're using a $5,000 per bay adjustment for car storage. And you say, okay, well, now I have 2 cars, so that's 10,000. I have 3 cars, that's 15. 4 cars would be 20. There's going to be a diminished return at some point where
Sure.
At some point that additional bay in the car storage may not contribute anything.
Right.
Right. So we can't just use simple math and take that out into perpetuity. There's got to be a cutoff there.
Sure.
What do you got for me?
Okay, can you see my website now up on the screen?
We've
Okay.
got you.
Okay, I'm going to log into our adjustment calculator. Use my typing skills.
I'm right there with you. Don't worry.
I can use 4 fingers.
No.
Okay, here's our original application. And what we start with is the zip code of the subject property, 55123 for me. Actually, why don't we use your zip code? We'll see what you think of this.
All right.
Where do you do an appraisal usually?
Let's use 42301.
Okay. Now what the calculator is doing,
Scott, I'm from, you know, I'm just old Kentucky kid. So
Okay.
you might not, let's not have your computer blow up if you're pulling up Western Kentucky.
Well, we'll compare costs. Okay. And let's say, are you doing a Q4, an average, a good standard level house?
Sure. That sounds good to me.
Okay. And how much of remaining life do you think there is in that property?
This is a hypothetical property, right? We're making stuff up here. So let's just say that we have a property, let's say we have 50 years of remaining economic life.
Okay, click calculate, and there are the adjustments. The second garage stall is worth $67,000 or $6,700.
Okay.
The first garage stall is worth more than that because it costs more to go from 0 to 1, than from 1 to 2, because we're just making a building bigger. But this was where we started, and as you can see, it all hangs on this number right here.
Sure.
Like if we said 30, we'll get smaller adjustments. Now the garage is 4,000 because there's 50% depreciation. 30 divided by 60 is 50% depreciation. So what we're doing here is we're relying on our ability to estimate depreciation to get adjustments. Now, if you have a way of doing or of establishing depreciation, you're good to go. But we realized that there was a lot of problems over here because depreciation was not accurately estimated. Are you ready to go to the next application?
Right. No, hang tight right here just a second.
Okay.
And I'll let our viewers know that, extracting your total economic life is a matter which can be done mathematically. Okay. I wrote an article on that, and you could find that at appraisereLearning.com. I believe it's called What's Your Number? Okay. And so it's just a mathematical equation, and it's taken from the market. Folks are asked all the time, what is the total economic life? And they'll say 70 or 60 or 50. And quite frankly, I don't care what your number is. That's not the real question. What's your number? The question is, where did you get that number? And
exactly.
So we can show you a method, which is a recognized technique found in appraisal literature, where it will show you how to reach right out and grab that number from your market, okay, mathematically. So when we get that number, that's what you're plugging in there. Now, Scott, if you stay there for a second, we've got a lot of viewers right now, and I know many of them have a lot of questions.
Okay.
So would you put that, and by the way, if you're watching this broadcast and you have a question, feel free to type that in. We'll get to as many questions as we can. At the end of this broadcast, we'll give you Scott's direct information so you can reach out to him directly. Folks, we have a Facebook page and a LinkedIn page. If you go in there and like us, that's a good way for you to stay in touch and communicate with us. But some of the questions I'm thinking that they have would be, number one, you've put my zip code, which is kind of a rural area, Western Kentucky, small community. Where is this cost data coming from?
Well, there's a publisher in California called National Building Cost, and they've been doing this for, I think, over 50 years. And what they do with their cost engineering is they figure out the cost of building 11 different quality levels of houses. The top quality up here, much more expensive. And the bottom quality, that's very inexpensive. We've taken their cost data and matched it up with the 6 UAD categories. If you've got a house that maybe was built as a Q4, but it's been remodeled with custom components, click this box. Now you're at a 3.5, and you get a little bit different number than if you're just at a 4. So that's, where we get the data, National Building Cost. Now they publish costs for the whole country, and then, like many cost books, I know RS Means does it this way. I think Marshall and Swift also. They localize that national cost to the local market for, these people use the wholesale price of lumber and some kind of a labor rate. But it's much different in 55123 where I live. Let's see how much more costs. So there's, it looks like maybe a 10 or 15% difference just based on the zip code. What was your zip code again? Let's go back.
42301.
Okay. If you'd like to see the behind the scenes guts of how this is working, I can take you into our user manual where we've explained it. Would that be a good time to do that?
Well, I don't know that we're going to have
Okay.
time to promote it today, but I'm sure that if any of the viewers want to do that, you'll be willing to do that. Hey, I've got a couple of questions from some viewers, Scott, and let me just ask you a couple of these, and then we can come back to this screen. So you could go ahead and minimize this screen if you don't mind. And I'm going to read a couple of questions and fire those at you now, okay? So the first question is regarding that the bedroom analysis that you did, or the results of the analysis that you broadcasted a moment ago.
Right.
The question is this: a fourth bedroom is usually accompanied with a larger GLA.
Correct.
That's not always the case.
Right.
It's not always the case, but it can be. So the question is, a fourth bedroom is usually accompanied with a larger GLA. How do you know you're not double dipping with a bedroom adjustment and a GLA adjustment?
Well, I guess I would answer that by saying just, like use common sense in the grid. This is just data. It's not a conclusive proof. So if you've got a house with if you've got a comp that matches in every way, the GLA is the same, and there's the only difference is the bedroom. If you don't see a difference, don't make an adjustment. If you're wondering what an adjustment might be, try it, and if it narrows the range, you might be getting closer to the truth. It's kind of a process of iteration. We keep taking what we know and applying it to a specific case, and trying to unlock the mystery of how all these different facets of the house are interacting. A lot of time it comes down to the color of the paint in the kitchen. I mean, there's no science on how to figure that out, but we're just giving people some objective data that they can use or not use at their discretion. But I think it's a good idea to get a start with just some numbers and then let their professional expertise build on that.
Sure. Let me ask you a couple other questions. And I just want to put a disclaimer out there and let folks know they need to analyze their own markets and check this stuff out.
Sure.
This is just a tool. Scott's developed a tool to provide you with some insight. Ultimately, you're still making that judgment call. He pulled up my zip code, and I don't know. I'd have to look. I'm not actively appraising as much as I used to be, but I think it might be naive to say that all garages in the entire zip code of 42301 is going to be based on a $6,000 adjustment. It's a tool that you're providing me data, and I think it would be fair to say big data, if you will. Right. Scott, here's another question for you. How do you determine the site improvement values?
Well, that's I don't really know the answer to that. I mean, I've always been taught that if it's got a nice big concrete driveway, it's probably $5,000. If you get into an area that's well on septic, that adds a lot more in value. Things like shrubbery, I don't think you can really include that because they're perishables. But there's expensive terracing that people do. I was at a house a couple of weeks ago that had a $200,000 pool, and a lot of it was landscaping and terracing, and that house did not sell for, looking at the comps, it maybe got 10,000 back from the market. It was a sale, so it was pretty conclusive that the site improvements in that case didn't really add very much. But it really depends on the situation. If it's rural, you might need a road, you might need well and septic. If it's a city lot, the site improvements might be very little, because there's just a little apron in front of the driveway on the alley, and there's a little sidewalk in front, and there you might be at a very small number. But it's
Scott, I have another question, and I don't know if your software does this, but the question is, when would you add a pool or outbuilding? That question comes from Medea.
Okay, we do not have a category for that. You would add it to site improvements. Like, for instance, if there was a pool, Ours doesn't calculate the cost of a pool. That would be something that you would have to determine on your own. Or the contributory value or the cost, however you want to do it. Up in my territory, we get a lot of pole barns, a lot of outbuildings. There's data that you can find to figure out the cost of those. National Building Cost, if you buy their complete book, it's like an $80 book. It will give you square foot costs for pools, for outbuildings. I don't think they do pools. So we can't help you there, but I would just categorize it as a site improvement.
Okay, great. I'm sorry, I'm working these questions up.
Sure.
So give me 1 second. Here's a question.
Excuse me, can I just interrupt you on the pools?
Go ahead.
We did a survey about a year ago that's available on our website if you're a member, and we asked for how much does the pool add to the value of a house, and we did it by climate zone. And as you would have guessed, the hottest climates it added the most, and in the coldest climates it added the least. It wasn't a big sample, but there is some data on our website from a small sample of appraisers that responded. So that's something that maybe we could look at in the future as a better pool adjustment survey.
Great. Guys, it's all a matter of gathering data. And then once you get the sample of data, you can analyze it and see if you can yield some sort of tangible result. And that's what Scott's trying to do here. Scott, we probably do want to go back and have you pull up the guts, if you will. I think that's how you refer to it, talking about the guts, because we have some questions coming in asking about documentation purposes, and they're great questions because, I don't think a good defense is, well, my computer just spit this out.
Right.
I think the users probably need a pretty good understanding of how that works. So here's the question. Matt M asked, for documentation purposes, does Solomon have pre-written verbiage explaining how the results are derived?
Yep, I'm glad he asked that question.
Here you go, Matt.
All right, here's their user manual. It's 17 pages. Shows how to do it all. For that first application that you looked at, let me see here. This is how I would describe it in the report. Adjustments for GLA, basement size, etc., are developed by extracting marginal replacement costs from the average cost data published by National Building Costs. Marginal cost is the amount total cost changes with the change in quantity. And then we depreciate it with the age life method. The appraiser's estimate of remaining life is divided by the economic life specified by National Building Cost. And that ratio is applied to the variable cost of that component. So to show you the math, scroll down a little bit. Here's an example of like, for instance, the GLA adjustment. In the zip code 55123, there's a 1.13 multiplier. In the cost data, there's an $86 base cost for the GLA. The economic life of 60 years is true for the Q4 rating. And we're saying that the economic life remaining life is 40 years. So we take the 1.13 times the 86.27 times this ratio, 40 divided by 60, and that's where that 64.99 comes from. Same is true for basement size all the way down to garage. Now this $86 number is the variable cost coming out of the cost manual. You won't find that in the manual. That's something that we calculate for you. I'll take you down to that page. What I've done here is I've plotted average total cost times quantity, plotted against quantity, and you get these regression lines that are really, really nice looking regression lines because they're pretty much arrow straight. So on a Q4, for instance, if you do the math, here's the regression calculation, y equals ax plus b. Any size Q4, according to the manual, costs $44,000 plus $86 a foot. So it doesn't matter how big the house is, one more foot is $86, and that's the number we use for the base to start off on our calculation. For basement size and basement finish, those don't change very much with quantity. The bath count doesn't change with quantity. Half bath doesn't change. Fireplace doesn't change. The garage, an additional garage cell is $8,300, again, from this published data source. So if it's 40 years life, 60-year economic life, 2/3 of this times this is $6,300. And again, that's just doing the math in the background. Now, an important assumption that we're making, very important assumption, is that depreciation, this 40 divided by 60, is equal throughout the house. And you may well know from your experience that a fireplace depreciates faster. A garage might depreciate less. GLA probably depreciates faster because GLA includes things like decorating, which might have a 10-year shelf life. It includes new siding, new windows, new roof. None of those things last for 60 years. So,
hey, Scott,
yep.
let me back you up just a second. You
Sure.
broke up just briefly. So go back to where you just started talking about that remaining economic life. You said a very important factor, and you broke up just a little bit. So if you go back down and just start from there again, I'd appreciate it.
Okay. What the big assumption that we're making here is that the depreciation, we know what the total depreciation is, we can figure that out. We just don't know if it applies equally to every category in the house. For instance, the garage might not depreciate. People don't care how the garage is decorated. It just has to hold the cars, right? They care very much about how the kitchen is decorated. The shelf life of decorating might only be 10 years. So the GLA number done this way might tend to get high because it includes things that have less than 60 years that are very important, like windows, siding, maybe a new furnace, but certainly decorating, which is so important. It only has, my wife tells me after 10 years, it's out of date. The condition can be good, but it's out of date, right?
Sure.
Like we're past the age of brass doorknobs and oak woodwork. Now we're into painted white woodwork with oiled bronze, at least up in my market. So we've entered the Bronze Age here. So these are the limitations of this quick way to get adjustments. And we've tried to address that by making a little bit more of a complex calculator. Is this a good time to show you that one?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay. So what we're going to do in this case, rather than estimate effective age, let's see here, we're going to estimate market value, which is probably a safer bet than estimating depreciation, at least in my brain. So let's say that we've got a house that we think is worth $250 because that's the sale price, and comp one is almost a perfect match, and it's sold for $250. So just for starters, we'll say $250 for the house. I think the land is $72,000, and again, that's another discussion. Site improvements are $5,000. Zip code up here, oops, 55123. Quality rating of 4. We're saying this is a 26 by 40 house, if you've ever seen one of those. Basement size, we're big on basements up here, so I'll include that. There's 800 square feet of finish in the basement. There's one basement bathroom, a fireplace, a deck, and a screen porch, and a garage. Now, when I click calculate, our database is going to translate all of these numbers into cost. These numbers are going to slide right over here. 250 goes right down here. This is the 1004 cost approach. So watch what happens here. Here's the dwelling number that you can use in the 1004 cost approach, the basement number, the garage number. This is the additional features, this $19,000, which in our case is for a deck, a screen porch, and a fireplace. And because we're estimating market value, and we know the characteristics of the house and the land value and so on, the numbers are telling us that the economic age, or the effective age, is 16 years out of a 60 economic life. Okay. Now, so far, we've solved the problem of not estimating depreciation. We're actually calculating it, again, from other assumptions of site value and so on. But the next step, we get into
and let me pause you right there, Scott.
Right.
So go back up to that market depreciation calculator.
Yeah.
All of this information is taken from the national, whatever your national source is,
right,
for cost. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
And I assume that factor. Go ahead.
It's a third-party source of unbiased data. I mean, think of it that way.
Gotcha. And what's bringing that to your local area is over on the left-hand side where you're typing in the zip code.
Right.
Correct. Okay. So it's bringing that down to your local level via your zip code.
Right.
Okay. So you've put the characteristics of the property over on the left-hand side.
Right.
And where we say market value, could that also be sale price if you were doing this for property?
It could be the tax assessed value. Think of it as we're testing an hypothesis. After you've got your comps, you've got a pretty good idea, and it's very fast to redo this if it turns out that when you use these adjustments, you get some goofy results. Then you can adjust your market value and hit it again. So.
Right. And just for our users, and because I'm a little slow, that's why I want to go back to that. Where you've got land value, I want to remind the viewers there's 6 different ways to develop an opinion of land value. Pick 1 or 2 and do that. Your site improvement value, you're getting that somewhere now. So you should be obtaining that from the market. And then the other characteristics down there, the gross living area, the size of the basement, all of those are facts. It's a fact that it's got a fireplace. It's a fact that the square footage of the deck's 200 square feet. And then what it's doing is it's taking this national cost estimator that Scott's referring to calculate that depreciation over on the top right-hand side.
Correct.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we were all on the same page. Go right ahead, sir.
Okay. So now we've got the effective age question solved. Now the big question is, does the depreciation occur equally in all these different categories? And I would say probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
Right. Like for instance, I always pick on the fireplace. I'm going to put 50 down here. And the reason I'm doing that is because the second fireplace might only add half as much as the first. Okay. So I'm using the calculator that way to give me an adjustment for the first fireplace and for the second fireplace. Another one, I might give a 50 to this deck because a deck only has a 30-year life compared to a 60-year. I mean, the house as a whole is 60, but the deck is only 30.
Right.
So there's my deck adjustment, $11 a foot for a 200-foot deck. It's $2,200. Same thing for an open porch. And again, I think it's because they're exposed to weather. They depreciate faster. They take more maintenance. So you'll find the right numbers in your market. There's still some judgment involved here. Here we're getting a look for the first time at the difference between a first garage stall and the second garage stall. If you're going from 0 to 1, we're saying $11,000. If you're going from 1 garage to 2, it's $7,000. And as Brian was saying earlier, the 5th and 6th garage might not add as much as 7. So use your judgment there. Now, the interesting one is this GLA number. And again, this number assumes that depreciation has occurred equally throughout the house, but yet the house that we're appraising and all the comps, they've all got remodeling that's been done since they were built 30 years ago. They've all got new windows. Some of them have got new siding. So the effective age, or excuse me, the economic life really is not 100% of 60. Again, we've done a survey of our users and the consensus is 64. So I will generally put 64 in just because I've got data to support that. That's what users of this software think this economic life boils down to. So now I go to the grid with both numbers and I start with 68. and if 68 kind of turns that grid inside out, then I think there's warrant to go down on the GLA adjustment to 43. But it really is important to bracket everything in the grid so that you can see how your adjustments are really working. You know, if you're coming at it from two directions, it's much better than saying, I'm an appraiser, I'm smart, I think the GLA is 64 bucks, that's why this one costs more than that one. You know, it's better to come at it from both ways.
Right. Hey, Scott, we've got a couple of other questions here. Matt asked a question. Do you have definitions for your patios, decks, etc., as to what they are?
I can't remember if I've written that down, but I know I've gotten a lot of feedback from people in Arizona, for instance, where there's covered porches or covered patios. But I would say go to National Building Cost. I'll try to review that myself, but my assumptions are that a deck is on a post foundation. A porch has got a foundation. A patio does not. So an open porch.
You just broke. Go back to, you broke up one more time, and it may just be me. I'm not sure.
Right.
A deck is on a post. Is that what I heard you say?
Right. A deck has got frost footings. You know, it's got some footings poured for it, but it's on a post foundation. An open porch has got a foundation that's probably consistent with the rest of the house, whether it's a climate where you're using a slab with a footing, or up here in Minnesota, it's an 8-foot, I think we've got a 4-foot frost line, so most people have basements. But a porch has got a foundation and a roof. And a screen porch has got a foundation, a roof, and screens. And then, of course, an enclosed porch, not necessarily heated, but an enclosed porch has got partial walls with windows, plus the roof and the foundation. So that's where we're getting those numbers. It's the definitions used by National Building Cost.
Okay. Scott, I have some other questions here. Tim Anderson says, does the calculator accommodate functional and or external obsolescence factors? Okay.
I'll start with the second one first. External obsolescence. I've never, I've always used the land value to represent the functional obsolescence. Like if the house is next to the freeway, the house is worth less because the land is worth less. I don't think it makes a lot of sense to say that land is just the same as the stuff away from the freeway, but then there's functional obsolescence. I think the lot would sell for less. So that's how I approach that. The question of functional depreciation, I generally don't get into that in my reports. And I think there's people that would say that things like decorating is a functional problem. You know, it could be in great shape, but the market doesn't want it when it's painted purple, for instance. It's great purple carpet, it's in great condition, but there's no demand for it. So no, we don't get into the functional part of things.
So this software is more in line with, or what you're embracing or calculating is more from a physical standpoint, not looking
right.
from a functional or external obsolescence standpoint.
Right.
Tim, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. If you get into the 1004 cost section and you know that there's physical depreciation, by definition, there would be less functional, or if you know that there's functional, that means that there would be less physical, so these numbers would get bigger. So you could figure it out if you knew what the functional was.
This next question may be for a different webinar or different time, because we don't have a whole lot of time left, but I do want to ask you this because you referenced it, and it's a question from one of our viewers. Michael G is asking, do you have an explanation or verbiage for the determination of effective age?
That's a really good question. I'll go back to the manual here and see if I can find it. In our glossary, we just to give you some background before I get to that question, and it relates, we use the age life method because that's what's implied in the 1004. That's how it works. So I went to the Dictionary of Real Estate Appraisal, page 8. It says it's a method of estimating depreciation in which the ratio between effective age and total economic life is applied to the current cost. Now, right away, I think they're mixing apples and oranges. What effect are we talking about? Are we talking about the physical effect? Here we're talking about economic life, not physical life. It's economic life. Now, physical and economic are the same when the house is new, but as the house ages, the how many years it will last is different than how much the market recognizes it's worth compared to its cost. So on page 93 of the Dictionary of Real Estate, the age of a property that is based on the amount of observed deterioration and obsolescence. So here it is, a question of condition. We're communicating condition by the effective age. But to me, when you're extracting adjustments, you should be thinking economic age, not effective age. So I've put a YouTube video up about that, but it is a confusing topic because to me, it does seem like if we're talking about remaining economic life and economic life, the correct term should be economic age. But the 1004 doesn't cooperate. It asks us to use effective age.
Okay. Let me give you another couple of questions, and then I've got some questions for you.
Okay.
Matt asked, is there not an option for 1-story versus 2-story?
Right. I grew up on cost data that distinguished between 1, 1.5, and 2-story houses. And when I saw national building costs didn't distinguish it that way, I talked to the guy that publishes the book, and he said that he's got pretty good data that a more important factor is the shape of the house, not the height of the house. In other words, a rectangular house costs more than a house that's L-shaped. And a house that's U-shaped costs even more than the one that's L-shaped. So what we've done is adopted his method and we're using the shape of the house rather than the stories to choose the right cost data. Now, I've made some assumptions. I've assumed that a Q5 and a Q6 are 4-corner houses. They call them corners. So those are rectangular houses. The Q3, we've assumed that it's the L shape. The Q2, we assume it's got 8 corners, I believe. And then the Q1 has got corners all over the place. I mean, it's a very expensive house to build because you don't get as much space when the floor plan gets complicated. There's a lot more exterior walls on the more expensive houses for the amount of living area. But yeah, that's a good question. We do not differentiate 1-story from 2. Now, in my market in Minneapolis, it works out pretty well because the 1-story houses have bigger basements, and that's where the adjustment kind of brings it together. You know, the bigger basement on the 1-story will move that cost up compared to a 2-story.
Sure. And Scott, you can minimize that screen there if you don't mind. A few more quick questions. We don't have a tremendous amount of time left, guys, so I appreciate your questions coming in. I'm trying to get to as many of them as I possibly can, and maybe we have Scott back for another broadcast in the future. Again, at the end of the broadcast, we're going to give you an opportunity to get his contact information so that you can reach out to him directly. Scott, Janice asked a question. Does the program require MLS to operate?
No, we're not sampling MLS at all. We're just using market. Well, you might need MLS to figure out what your comps are, but we're not sampling MLS data for our adjustments. We're assuming that there are some assignments where you have the sample problem, where you can't get good data from MLS for instance, a garage adjustment or GLA adjustment. So we're doing it strictly on cost data.
Great, thank you. Derek asked, am I understanding that determination of adjustments overall are gathered from a consensus of other appraisers throughout the country? Wouldn't these dollar amounts vary from region to region?
Right. Well, what we started off with was cost-based adjustments, and that's the calculator I showed that was, entering the GLA and so on. We realized that there are some adjustments for which there is no cost associated. Like in our database anyway, a 4-bedroom cost of the same size is the same value as same cost as a 3-bedroom house. Now we know that there's an adjustment required in a lot of cases. So that's where we tried to solve the sample problem a different way. Rather than sampling the cost book, now we're sampling appraisers. Okay, so we've got 2 different things going on. They're both addressing the same problem of a poor sample out there in the marketplace. In one case, we sample appraisers, and that's what that calculator was about with the bedroom count. In the other case, we're using cost data and depreciation to suggest adjustments.
All right, Scott, let me ask you a couple of questions. We have some others from viewers that we'll try to get to. I would like to remind folks this broadcast is being recorded. You can view this in the future or tell your friends or whatnot if they want to see it. I'd also like to let our viewers know we have a promotional code called webinar if you want to take any of Appraiser eLearning classes. And as a consequence of you being here today, you could use webinar for a 10% discount on any of our courses. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and join us on our LinkedIn connection. Scott, just real quick, how many current users or approximately users do you have? I know this is relatively a new software that you're offering, but about how many users do you have?
I think right now we're at about 200.
Okay. And do you have data for all markets, or is this in just particular geographic area?
Well, the survey data comes from all over the country, but it's isolated. There might be 2 answers from Nevada, 1 from Florida. You know, the cost data is, you know, the claim by the cost data supplier is that it's good for the whole country if you use the zip codes.
Gotcha.
So.
Gotcha. Okay. And if folks want some more information, I know you've got some videos out there that people can watch these videos at no cost. And you mentioned a video earlier about statistics, I believe. If
right.
you could remind us of that video. I watched it. I thought it was fascinating. It really gave an answer that you didn't expect. And it was about gumballs. So it
right.
was kind of an interesting video about the number of gumballs. And what I want to say just real quickly on that, when you talk about that video, if I have a jar of gumballs, actually estimate, you're not developing an opinion per se, because you're either going to get the right answer or wrong answer. A lot of what we do as an appraiser is it's not fair to say right or wrong because it's subjective in nature. We're developing opinions. But when we talk about cost, price, or number of gumballs, that's a fact. And you either can estimate it correctly or incorrectly. You could be close or you could be very far off. So tell folks how they can find the video, and we may put that up on our website as well at Appraiser eLearning, or up on the Facebook page. We'll share that. If you give us a link, Scott, we're happy to do that. But tell everybody how they can get the video of the gumballs.
Should we try to play it? Would that be dangerous on our broadcast here?
How long is it?
It's 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, let's just give them a link.
Okay.
We need to wind this thing up. We'll give them a link, and they can jump to you or jump to me. But just give them the cliff notes of that, if you don't mind.
Okay. On our website, www.solomonappraisal.com, there is a tab that you can click that says Peer Consensus. And if you click that and scroll down, you'll get the YouTube video. It's not something that I produced. It's just something I found, but it's a statistician from England. There's also a link on that same website under downloads where you can download the little calculator we showed you earlier with the bedroom count and the GLA and so on.
Great. And if they want information about your software or how to get in touch with you, or maybe some of these questions we didn't quite get to, how can they reach out to you, Scott?
Well, we've got an email is info@solomonappraisal.com. There'll be a link, a contact link on the website also, and I'll get those emails.
Very good. Scott, I'd like to thank you for being here today. A lot of great information. If somebody wants to check out your software, is there an opportunity for them to do that?
Right. If they, again, go to the website and they click subscribe, there will be a free option where they can try it for 15 days, no cost. And then if they decide they want to subscribe, it's $10 a month or $100 per year. But there's a 15-day free trial.
Right, fantastic. So the viewers out there, if you'd like more information, you can reach out to Scott directly. You can email him. If you'd like to play around with the software, he's giving you a 15-day trial at no cost to you, so the price is right. Again, we'd like to thank our guest at the Appraisal Report this month, Mr. Scott Cullen and his software. You have anything in closing you'd like to say, Scott?
Well, I just hope you all have a nice 1,000-square-foot Rambler in your reporting next week. Something with lots of comps. Lots of comps. All right.
Right. Are you going to be anywhere where folks can actually come meet you? You say you go to some conferences and whatnot. Do you have a schedule? I
don't have anything like that planned, but as things roll forward here, I would love to meet with you at one of your seminars or trade shows. So we'll let you know if that happens.
Great, great. Again, I'd like to thank all the viewers. I'd like to thank my guest this month, Mr. Scott Cullen, for showing us a sneak peek at his software. Thank you, Scott. For all the viewers watching, if you have any ideas or suggestions about a webinar, if you have a particular guest you would like for us to have on, please let us know. We're providing these free of charge, trying to get more information out to you. And we would welcome your opinions, your questions, your concerns, and your criticism. So we're passionate about what we do. We're trying to bring information to appraisers to help you in your job function. My name is Brian Reynolds. I'd like to thank you for joining us this month with the Appraisal Report. Have a great day and stay tuned for future broadcasts. Thanks, folks.